learning like after taking schools. They also have Joel Tillman, Dean of the School of Foreign Service here at Georgetown University. And I can tell you how pleased we are to gather here live and in person after so long. Maybe also what huge audience here at home to welcome. Remarkable community, 60th anniversary of Smart Frequency. I'm very pleased to spend time memory this anniversary here at Smart Frequency is the oldest school in the United States. This school was created in Century Day as global food options therapy. This was what happened before the cause of destruction and global pandemic was raging. Americans who fought countries around the world to trade feelings, trying to hold it and to place on a nation and seek the That's what led to the inauguration of the very first school fully to prepare for generation of leaders of service to the world. That inauguration conference in this city was founded by a generation. I think that we are as we were, we all resolved. And for 60 years, as English, the American frontier had made a moment with so many of the United States of English when you look at Western, you look at peace, power, and prosperity, and danger, particularly in those parts of the world that have gotten overcome, covered in fellow, feeling from rumors of conflict and violence. So we at Georgetown, the School of Foreign Service, still the largest peer school in the U.S. Foreign Service. We are now the ranks of U.S. Navy, U.S. Navy has been here as agency for 5 years. Like I dare not, the research, our loving story, we can master the leadership of the president, of course, these schools of projects in which we our last individuals led by former U.S. Congress around the bills and the secular tradition and to raise the foster the future development based on changing principles of prison. So we are very proud to have you this year and public partners ours against violence and human rights. Season 2. I'm not going to go sensitive operations to present your vision for future. The population of this world, but our main fellow is in the free in the mind and knowledge that was again about many changing global leaders. Let me turn to our new sponsor for this event, which is Greg, President and CEO of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, an organization that shows the way to reach beyond the organization, to build policy, So thank you for coming. If you sit on something from your GFC to come closely together with me, with Georgetown School of Service, I can see every day of work doing wonderful contribution that you and your colleagues make. And it's really just it's to join forces to come together in person to help U.S. and municipal leaders think about what's going to be a really important conversation. And one thing that one of my favorite things is coming to campus here each semester to invite wonderful professors and partners along the way. Second she teaches a class that some of your students might have taken, the National Security Curriculum. And actually, we're going to just Wednesday on the topic of basic aspects of national security. Now, I have to tell you, the students will always be perplexed when I tell them the legislation that guides our aid policy today was written in 1960 under President Clinton. So think about this. We are still particularly so throughout the world, delivering remarkable results and uninvested technology. Now, while in my opinion, transformational results, number four, here's what I want to tell you. In the last few years, there's been over 50 bipartisan bills that have signed into law for U.S. emergency. Everything from water to food security to fighting HIV AIDS to empowering workers. American sponsor and supporting and looking out for members of free practice to capacity projects. So that's why Washington doesn't particularly do our action. In terms of development policy, very small market vaccine supply. Even when I see this, I see the same thing that the question really understood these research matter. No matter how individuals are values that are barriers to health, not personal security, I see this every day in my own experience in English with first scholarship that's business leaders and retailers, vet techs, and farmers, every across the country. Now, especially when I travel country, I travel around the country and we host town hall meetings, locally, members of Congress, and we talk about what it's like. It's worth very well to advance and to support effective development agencies in programs. And we're interested in talking about these issues. But I want to say that one of the things that we learned most in the last 2 years, within the global pandemic, seeing the progress that we've made versus is that we're not moving fast enough. We're not moving fast enough to meet the challenges of the challenges around the world. And so, fortunately, this is what today's conversation is on. This is my request to ask the listening consent. So, here's the steps that the U.S. Tourism Department agency. Events the world of premier private and companies global. The first U.S. administrator who left the seat of the National Security Agency. President William Sanders knows he's an advocate of vaccine and investment. As a journalist at a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and a tireless advocate for journalists, for those whose lives are being threatened by conflict and disaster, she is someone who knows the world and knows the future. But she also knows the world as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She has led America's close outreach, hoping to rally the world to tackle issues in Ebola, helping us to rally the world climate, health, and both options have refugees in civil society. Now, she is the administrator, bringing remarkable leadership, her expertise, and her tenacious passion to elevate the agency to new heights. To tackle so many challenges, and to drive things towards the next chapter in transformation to USA. Now, extra focus for today's meeting is we're going to get to know Megan Henry, to Kayla. In 2020, USDA found through Georgia Forest Service investment student who will leverage the conversation with active partners. So, please join me in welcoming USDA Administrator Samantha Powell as she shares a new vision of so to be together. truly to address people who feel this. If you saw this for that introduction, please support and see how it was in leadership coach. When we first started this coaching course, the next stages through national development and power and budget plus, plus cultivating encouragement. We may not have had a 50th anniversary, or a 60th, without the growth of youth and members to travel to nations to cool our military, private sector, nonprofits, and the general public. And build the development process of mission and culture. Plus, if we are able to if we are going to small build the industries of the future, if we look at our first focus on the last 15 seconds and create freedom for you more than in 1951, a young congressman just returned to the first time just blocks from his head after a 7-week whirlwind tour around the world. Prior to this trip through the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, and Eastern Southeast Asia, he would be dismissed by China as a writer with little to contribute in the world of confused. But on his travels, this young person saw manifest movements and struggles against containment of who saw the United States back its Western allies and non-colonial ambitions at the expense of the state's nations. The Candlewood Conference and the Indian Congress were in its backers and more than listening to what people across the world wanted for themselves. In the radio booths after his trip, he argued that the pressures to be those of the world loaded on his life and leaders. In fact, this realization of the right of others to independence that we cherish. And though he was passionate and love can deal effectively with his enemies, such as poverty and want. America needed to energize the police to load with ideas and widespread participation. From policy, he said, it was too important to all of us to leave it to the experts and the leaders. His remarks were widely dismissed. His ideas were rejected as his own father responded regularly where he ridiculed his son's idea that America needed a military. 10 years later, John F. would become principal of the United States and an executive order military ancestry on 60 years ago this week, he would leave the USA and cement his thinking in a world which America extended its hand to those who need. And when it did so, that world would be freer, healthier, more peaceful, and more resource. Across 60 years, USAID has been a remarkable force for progress in the world. We have helped nations around its numbers. On the top is HIV, malaria, and diseases. We have helped billions escape the fates of feudal poverty and depression, transform societies from places of scarcity to abundance. We have created more than 2,900 disasters, and we have helped organizations or secured collections in nearly 90 cases since the beginning of the It is a phenomenon specific that we would might have imagined 60 years ago. Yet, as Christ's footprint and our mission grew, and the demands on the workforce expanded, the agency was forced to transition from undertaking projects directly with local communities to managing company leaders. Mounting people meant less direct engagement. The agency faced frequent political audits, its funding and staffing were frequently scrutinized and slammed down. Its authorities were splintered through bureaucratic force, even as its responsibilities still taught the growing number of classes of the like any institution, public such forces to identify. Use their power on field workers to execute its programs. It recruited from the St. Paul schools, Georgetown, but not Brown, not Hopkins, but not Mary Washington. Despite its track record and aspiring results, most Americans didn't know much about it or what it was up to. Yet, never before have all things been so intertwined with those of people looking for it. The foreign policy community phenomenon here has been said for decades that problems cross borders, which is called problems around disputes. They've been said for decades what happens if they have that shit. And though people understand that rationale for something, today it isn't just an intellectual thing. It is a complex and huge experience. It is losing our friends and our grandparents and clothes to a disease that originated forever altered the whole economy. It is almost 3 centuries of learning history that destroys the fire sports and science, fires that burn our sounds, that freezes that break our plates, and droughts that turn from loaves to dust. It is all of us who raise our housing costs by their progress on the underneath, farming costs, who inflict on consumers principle, and articles who try to manipulate our elections and split disinformation to serve division in society. But we must do more than simply argue the exodus of international society. We also must work to change intellectual property. As Europeans, we can't live in today's space for us. We must offer people not a vision purely of international development, but a vision of inclusive development. We mean that in 3 ways. First, we have to broaden our coalition to allow people from more diverse backgrounds and groups of all kinds to participate in this communication. We must make aid more accessible to all groups. Second, we must shift our focus to be more focused on the voices and needs of these marketplace. We must make aid more people. And third, in confronting some of the biggest changes of our time, COVID-19, climate change, all of our activities, we must listen to what our partners in the countries where we work are asking for us. We must make aid more responsive. These are the changes that I recognized during my tenure at AUC. So first, we will need help. Over several years, USAID's workforce has been slowly depleted, and at current countries of civil service and pharmaceutical staff of both communities, these global conflicts and catastrophic development needs are accelerating, and after a complex emergencies in COVID-19 has ballooned students from 16 to 44. As a result, USAID has created unsustainable workarounds to fill staffing shortfalls. Some 90% of our positions in global health, humanitarian assistance, and conflict prevention and stabilization goals are separate areas of personal short-term conflicts. So to this end, we must increase our career workforce in these areas. To build a kind of future-ready staff and support future. But this means staff that have defined the cost. Today, Hispanic, Indigenous persons with disabilities, for example, are significantly underrepresented in those. The percentages are somewhat more represented with regards to Asian and stuff. Yet, like all people in the USA, are significantly underrepresented in senior positions, policy, and technical roles. If we want agency of what we want is to have feminism and from perspectives, all of our best thinking, and we must learn to find the function of state as we think about it. Since joining USA, I've been beneficial always been a career to devise a good person equity vision strategy. Because of their great work, I was able to find that strategy in my first day of office. We were privileged to host our first historically black colleges and universities recruiting conference, followed by the first Hispanic serving institution recruiting conference. Going forward, we will do 50% better paid internships, nearly 700%, from our $1.5 million, because we know that unpaid internships will be a barrier to entry for candidates from the communities. In partnership with Harvard University, we plan to double the number of diamond qualifications, which work follows for 2 years of practice before receiving foreign service appointments at USC. I'm so excited to sit down with one of our incoming fellows, Caleb Holden, after our speech. My most recent class, our foreign service officers at USC, is our most diverse class yet. And as we step up, including personalities and independent services only have, we also want to include them by creating a kind of welcoming, nurturing environment for them to serve and supporting their opportunities to training. For the first time, we say we've been on board a chief diversity officer who will report directly to me and help us hold ourselves accountable to these goals. I will prioritize activity promotion, regardless of whether they're foreigners, service officers, civil servants, local authority, service professionals, or third-party contractors. Our contracts include often dispatch to some of the most dangerous places, consider basic benefits like retirement accounts, parental leave, and health and life insurance, and our located funds, which are just are the heart and soul of our missions overseas. The flexibility part of the American staff we are leading across a wide range of USA pathways. We currently give opportunities for youth and veterans, and their benefits are never we are committed to opening up new platforms for growth and power in the field and helping to extend and circumstances commensurate with the experience and expertise. In addition to making USA more accessible in terms of who joins our groups, we also have to vastly expand groups within the town, especially if we hope to make sustainable difference. USA currently has 750 active public publishers. They work out 6 billion. And here's the good news: when we public dollar, when we take forward, we are typically able to verify people in $6 privately. We've done this to make a list for forward to bring basically just taking arguments anywhere in the world to move medicines across Africa. We partnered with Korea and farmers to support coffee farmers. We work with Google to figure out what food in Liberia. These projects tend to be grants rather than being taken to scale. They're often too slow, realistic, too slow, and too bureaucratic for all but these patients' goals. And these partnerships often ask too little businesses with whom we pushing for broader reforms. So today, pleased to announce we intend to launch a centralized, flexible fund devoted to private sector engagement. Coupled with critical bureaucratic reforms, this will allow us to be far more nimble, strategic, and mobilizing businesses around the world to advance our food policies, such as advancing women's participation in the economy. To make it easy for America's private small businesses, NGOs, faith-based organizations, minority serving institutions, school groups, and foundations to connect to USA. Today, we are also launching workwithusa.org. That site is our new welcome one-stop shop that lets any organization know exactly how to pursue USA partnerships, including offering, for example, online courses and good fresh performance. It is crucial that we engage more frequently and more intensely and sustainably with the broad range of partners as they offer a skill that no single thought agency can create. So we have to lower barriers for these organizations and institutions to join our mission. And that's especially true of the local organizations and communities based in the countries in which we live. When we partner with these local NGOs and local businesses, we have an opportunity to double our impact. To not just manage a project to deliver results is important, but to grow the local capacity of that business or organization so it's in a position to sustain and foster its relationship with USA entities. Yet, in the last decade, despite numerous efforts, initiatives, and even support from California, the Republic addressing dollars going to local partners increased from 4% to 6%. Most recently, in 2017, 60% of our assistance was awarded to these strategic partners. This is because it's largely because working with local partners is more difficult, it's more time-consuming, and it's riskier. Local partners often lack internal accounting expertise that contracts are to supply. They might lack the legal concept needed to short the contracts, many of which have hundreds of pages long. So clearly, this status quo is not percentages. And as for this, the status quo is tough to shift. There is a lot of ground pulling in this direction, and we have got to try. So moving forward, we're going to provide at least a quarter of all of our funds directly to local partners over the course of the next 4 years. To support the burden of the Israel that this will place on our missions, we will expand our capacity to issue and manage areas across the agency and expand the authorization for our small service contracts and local employees to play a larger role in building and managing assistance. We're going to begin this effort here in our atmosphere. Today, we're pleased to announce the launch of a new Central America Alcohol Initiative, for which we intend to devote $300 million to work directly with local organizations in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to create a locally expanded, sustainable practice in the country's borders. Last topic is so crucial because we can if we truly want to make it inclusive, local voices need to be the center of everything we do. We've got to tap into the knowledge of local communities and improve experiences. Otherwise, we risk reinforcing the systemic inequities that are already in place. As Americans, we pay a flat fee and up to our own values. I will approach this work with attention and with humility. But the entire development community needs to interrogate the traditional power dynamics of the living economy and look for ways to amplify local voices of those who too often are left out. So in addition to our 25% target of our systems going to local partners to go on announcing that by the end of the decade, 50% of our program, at least half of every dollar you spend, will need to place local communities in the lead to either co-design a project, set priorities, drive implementation, or evaluate campaign programs. We are also taking steps to strengthen the inclusive development office that we opened last year. In addition to our 50% local voices target, we are going to keep moving forward with changes that will enable our staff to better focus our programs so they reach communities and marginalized groups, including indigenous communities, LGBTQ people, persons with disabilities, and racially ethnic communities. Today, very few of our missions and efforts are focused on the specific challenges facing marginalized groups in the community. Going forward, we want every mission to have the dedicated phone service officer and very focused is gender equality and inclusivity. The person that helps us institutionalize this work to make a focus on gender equity, not just as its intention, but an important part of the human program. When it comes to empowering women in various investment is huge economic security dividends, I plan to ask every leader to release a public percentage of their work that advances gender equality and would be ranked above percentage. Finally, we want to make sure that we are deploying the policy incentives in economics and behavior science to make sure our programs have an impact on underserved communities and truly maintain equity. Let me give you an example here. One of the biggest barriers that we face in trying to accomplish our goals is social stigma. Women make up more than 50 living in the country. But even though we now have pills that can prevent HIV infections before they happen, the overall research demonstrated that taking preventive medication still carry with it the impression of illness, still carry those. Now, thankfully, looking at the virtual public policy was predicated for generations who were expected to need vaccine drugs or some vaccine with people. But as I hope we all know by now, we can't assume that we know how people will be. We can't assume that what works in one cultural community will easily work in another. Understanding human behavior really concrete people, not intuitions or assumptions. And by actually engaging with young women at risk of HIV infections and hearing from them, we will actually redesign and rebuild, rebrand the preventive medication speaking. Instead of a pill bottle, a now in a container that looks like my place. We are now saving lives as well as this is the purpose of policy that to make progress we have to understand human behavior, gathering and applying evidence from the communities we serve, and to deploy this kind of analysis in our programs as well as to help us integrate insights from the EMS control trials and other empirical assessments of potential programs. We will start a new office of behavioral science and experimental economics. We will report to a new elevated and expanded capabilities. The position your chair here in Bruce now, Steve Eccleston on staff. He's cheering, so I must be on the right track. I think I'm on the right track. So here we go. We were going to make it more accessible to people and organizations who want to participate. We will make it more equitable to the costs that are happening. But when I say we need to make it inclusive, also we need to listen to our program missions and story impact. Across all of our programming, we have a real opportunity to make it more responsive. Let me illustrate how we use three of the biggest challenges we face today: COVID-19, climate change, and the rise of corrupt organizations. On COVID-19, clearly we've heard that our purpose is about vaccines. Thanks to President Biden's global commitment to become the most national vaccines we are raised up to deliver. more than 1 billion doses of the Pfizer vaccine, as well as 200 million surplus domestic doses to low and lower-income countries, while pushing other countries to step up their own vaccine connections. Yet, the vast majority of these vaccines are produced by the world's largest economies, even though the vast majority of need, not just for COVID disease generally, is in developing countries, making this gap one of the strongest problems poor countries have faced during the pandemic, and risk to future global health and equity. Well before this pandemic showcased this challenge, the entire pandemic under more than 1.2 billion people produced only 1% of the vaccines people that consumed. Countries don't want to depend on others for vaccines any more than they want to depend on us for foreign assistance. That is why the United States is already working to significantly bolster vaccine manufacturing capacity abroad in countries like India and South Africa, and looking to do so more. This will not only bring hundreds of millions of vaccine doses directly to the markets that need the most, but it would allow developing countries to respond more quickly and effectively to their own health needs. We will also continue to use this global COVID-19 vaccine push to strengthen health systems in partner countries, strengthening health tools, supporting the health workforce, and improving health information management. We have to get shots in arms today, but we should do it in a way that leaves countries in a position to treat their populations today. To that end, alongside our efforts to increase the supply of COVID-19 vaccines and strengthen local health systems, we will work with countries around the world to develop global, regional, and country-level capabilities needed to meet future pandemic threats. As part of this effort, we are doubling the number of partner countries who will support in preventing and detecting pandemic threats. And after receiving countless requests for help from countries in crisis during this pandemic, we are establishing a new and dedicated U.S. emergency response unit to lead on infectious disease outbreaks, including by facilitating rapid storage capacity when it occurs. Big climate change. Earlier this week, some bipartisan task to submit to the U.S.'s ambitions to cut our carbon pollution in half by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. We are on the verge of the largest legislative effort we have ever seen to make clean energy cheaper and create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs needing care and water support and advance the cause of environmental justice. But climate justice does not keep professionals. Poor countries, those that have the least to do for the change of climate, the most to lose in experiencing its effects, are asking for help. As a wealthy nation responsible for much carbon pollution both on the atmosphere, we bear a special responsibility to help poor nations with low emissions of their own, manage the worst effects of COVID-19. Later today, I'm going to talk about to support a major initiative that President Biden announced to be listed. The President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation of Disasters, or PREPARE. Together with the support of Congress, the U.S. government is requesting $3 billion annually for something poor countries have been asking us for. Funds to help and solve the most vulnerable countries brace for change. We will help support more than 500 billion people to adapt to climate change through efforts like scaling drought-tolerant agriculture, establishing early warning systems for storms, and creating new insurance schemes that can support people when their harvest fail and livestock perish. And finally, when it comes to advancing democracy around the world, we've got to listen to those brave activists, protesters, and journalists who are crying out for respect for human rights and appealing for our safety. JFK is the most powerful force in the world as humankind's eternal desire to be free and independent, is as true today as it was back then. Though we have seen democracies wither and militaries steal power away from civilians in Guinea and increasingly in Sudan, progressive reform movements all over the world are working every day to ensure that democracy comes. In Zambia, Angola, and nearby Maryland, Republic, for example, we have seen landslide victories for elected leaders who campaign on strengthening democracy, embracing the rule of law, and fighting corruption. What we and other democracies need to do is show up. Show up and help leaders show tangible benefits as we move toward more freedom, more respect for human rights, and more accountable and agreed institutions. Established democracies also need to have set goals of learning for surveillance technologies and digital disinformation as autocrats are smarter in their attempts to control and manipulate people. We need to help support free and fair global press in this future. And we need to tackle with all the seriousness that matters the scope of global corruption is basically development and use. It harms long-term economic development, scares away private sector investment, deepens inequality, and even harms the environment as a result of illicit logging, fishing, and pollution. It also disproportionately harms the most marginalized in society. It is actually fully inclusive in its malignancy. And also is with autocracy, ruling it. It means all those who centralize power, centralized power. When it was exposed to illicit food and trafficking systems like human issues. But the record number of protests around the world in 2019 was globally more than half in protests against corruption and states led to changes in government. President Biden has already announced bold new steps to tackle corruption and other tax havens, and we will launch several initiatives to strengthen democracy and fight corruption. This December's Summit for Democracy. But today, I'm pleased to announce an initiative that responds to a request from a group of independent journalists I met with during my first week in the USA. It turns out that autocrats and oligarchs often employ the crude but effective tactic to kill stories that are right. They steal reporters until those reporters abandon stories for their own business. As a result, we are launching the Global Defamation Defense Fund to protect journalists against lawsuits that are designed to deter them from doing their work. We will offer them courage to survive, coverage these journalists, coverage to survive defamation claims or deter autocrats or corruption trying to steal out business in the first place. To counter the ever-changing threats to democracy, we're evolving. We depend on this sort of innovation. And it is the people on the front lines who need us when we can support them. We all remember Jeff Casey, not a time for his and other leaders. What your country can do for you and what you can do for your country. We all understand that commercial. But to all of us matter, what Kennedy was asking of us, it was not actually, as it may sound, a call for local volunteers and domestic renewal. In fact, Kennedy was asking Americans to commit themselves to global action, to struggle against tyranny, poverty, disease, and suffering. It was a vision for international development, often not in some proclamation or building policy directive, but it was widely watched for President Kennedy would ever give. He spoke about heart assistance because he wanted Americans to be proud of the role they were playing in tackling the world's greatest challenges. Today, Americans should know that for 60 years, USA has served as some of the brightest, most dedicated, and most effective professionals in the world, and they take that. They think that American generosity is having a people in need. That's agency so privileged to be. That is the agency that I'm so excited to further unleash. Not just as an agency for international, but as an agency for inclusive this country's diverse talent, and private sector, inclusive of the voices of those who are privileged to serve in the South, offering problems abroad in a way that's responsive to our partners, state lives, and that we advance American interests and goals. Thank you. Thank you, Administrator Powell. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today at Georgetown University. Mostly, the representation speech really speaks to the very value of both in capital and also things. So, also 2020 photo to you and to Serena and to the others funny. And I really look forward to that the representation of the thing and being there. So one thing that I'd like to emphasize is really how much your approach provided with these sentences allows these phrase for words make it more flexible and key solution to it that is to so thank you for with that, I'd like to follow up on more inclusive vision for development and this subsidy objections that we have made, right? We talked about three sort of dimensions of education development. And one thing that I to us is how we say it takes to really accomplish, for example, the localization agenda, and how it protects these results what does that strategy look like collaborative about well, thank you for being such a piece of massive following the program. Based on growth planning, whether it be for this contributions or also trying to do the next yep. So so here sorry, let me start with just a little bit of historical context so that really my predecessors so that in USA we actually have gathering around the university of all the research institutes each of them many finding impacts like academic impacts but history and as I think that in recent years all recent histories to pursue this narrative of justice very well. So my preference was amazing people, really determined staff is very dedicated to the decision they took. Yeah, they love the percentage. This is very good. So that's why talking about governance is awesome. It's so counterintuitive because it understood just all of the society that there's nothing that you can control that you wouldn't do yourself. So to talk about this, you have to understand that sometimes I think the job of these all that years turns out that contracting with USC is grow with the same set of partners. It's just that there's a disparate impact as those requirements on smaller scrappy organizations that have to like what capacities within the organization. So you asked about doing it first of all, for example, active and predecessors, but understand the place that you're able to work in some ways and the other. And on the there's huge support for this initiative, this huge frustration, and things like this exist. So we're hopeful that we can factor that desire to change into the flexibility for us to be able to sit kind of left right seat with those organizations to help them build out that capacity. Now, in the short and medium term, that's more of a staff. Because with a large organization, you put out the request for 100 large organizations to solve the capacity internally. With the smaller ones, in a sense, that can be almost a mentorship or partnership. But right now, our bandwidth of our staff is stretched. The description is put there, and there's climate shots and these developments and policies. There's plus staff attrition, and you're not looking necessarily from your staff anyway to grow the other years. So that's our steady state, which is how we have to face the force. But so too, we need from Congress the flexibility for our workforce to be able to do that as part of the resources and organizations. And we have goals for ourselves in business. So these are medical targets we do, and that's the goal of the first step is definitely a pilot program is needed. Then it will get capital to what we have heard. And hopefully that putting this out there, knowing enough support this has, and moving forward, and looking at locally employed staff and farms resources and pieces of it. And we can imagine how excited they are about these applications and hopefully that have us so far. We need the resources to be able to invest in doing whatever the district of these restrictions such as corona. This is foreclosing the possibility of working with USA and those organizations and do that. Something else stands out to me is really this relationship between the person who finds, validating and diplomatic serving to understand myself as activist and fears activist. My question is, how can you dispel this not funny, right? How to the community to activists to organize them, but also public service, and how we bring our values into this service space. It's a great question. It turns out this was me. And so it was often frustrated by what I had to feel like that I could do and get from once I was in government institution, but I wasn't in a position directly to do it. So I needed someone to pick up that cause and wait for someone to reach out and pick up the idea and do something. So for me, being outside of that regular kind of frustration and just it wasn't the kind of 6 years that there was a situation going on behind the curtain for 6 months and people had some sense of that. It was more I just I needed to know that there was something I needed to figure out and just fight. To fight this over the joy is you bring the happiness, you bring the strength, and you don't have to get creative, you're there. The goal is to persuade people to say that that's why you're trying to coalesce and you're trying to organize and inspire people to the passion of the institutions. It's the same skill set, it's the same ability to follow people and narrate story and build up that's a huge part of this confidence, but keeping people calm, people are still one person getting another story. So, our experience is that to see this really built up through having been outside for 4 years, having written about social media, and seeing lots of other things in the US. And then the experience of watching this happen and the things that these conscious teams. This was not satisfying. It's like you want to go through this very kind of small, you're trying to tell you about something, even if everything's wrong, polarization domestically is very limiting, which is some of the challenges are facing that crowds that wasn't aware that they were losing that in government capacity. But at the same time, to be back in your arena of your advocates to work with such an institution as well as to be advocates for this and encourage people to come and join us. To me, that to see your ideas and optimism, frustration, and real resources, giving real progress, constant moments. It's very good that to connect is also a good opportunity for people to be able to do instance of how something is a thought and believe in that change and then bring it into the institution and try to get it done. Thank you. Thank you for that it's really the things that skills, right? It's just media. So this time I think we plan to conduct candidates for SGLC. We also represent SAPs from balance. So before we open up to start first, I'll go to Nikita McKenna, who's the CEO of NASCAR. Thank you. Thank you very much. One of the critical challenges that we have obviously, my organization is we always but always sure that we continue to investigate that. Please don't investigate how to develop it. And looking at the insights for yourself long-term partnerships. Well, the dimensions of our development actually explicitly present resources to I think better than the which is it's not. So as we have more common facts, transparency, and number of space people have. Certainly, never talk about that. Including just food security, the new conflicts that come up so just not how we're emergencies is a single thing, but it's a price fixed. It's a list that includes parts of the field metaphor. Talking about the fish, so I think that I think some of the ways to manage to do and investments say in domestic relations, especially working to just kind of this agile citizen government, which just focused on people this needs to be in the coming days, but that was one that just wasn't collecting any tax on. So it seems like discussions through performance and mechanisms for cases to go up. We actually just need to safety to summarize what the emergency to get through but also making those structural investments in private systems and banks, not just small support the system to make that so that's the kind of programming that is doing there. And that's one reason why it says so much it's a piece of every property just function people think about what the public sector is doing, by things like this being announced, but you see that as getting yourself to some other things about kids. So it's been in the private space encouraging to see the private sector get more drawn to renewables and energy space, but there's less private sector interest so far. As mentioned, investing. And then lastly, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about growth and expectations as well, which is, I think, which is very important, which is when you provide emergency assistance, how to do it differently. For example, now acknowledging responses that are not for the time today. There's not as hard to be a conflict resolution that's going to feel safe. That to just be so how markets demand and where people just assistance is much more common than most. I feel like these sites as coding such a method to observe in the data is really looking for female models to be found for us to really look at the field. And first, I can do that better. And there's nothing good. Hercules, how simply how to put it to the lives. So you have the same kind of magnitude of story impact. And actually, the workings that have been in the last few years, same magnitude of the far fewer casualties because the road that just the example that all of our programs work with communities, something that places and so that resilience adding that component to emergency response. Thank you. We represent the business side. Yes. And if you knew what we did, I guess it's safe to put but we see that very few, not just large businesses, but small businesses that are part of all sides of the fact who are part of this racing. And I think part of the effort, as you pointed out, is to give these resources, people education, to really recognize that you can with new businesses. But I also like to say to have to there's really focus. Think about what you can do interpolation campaign that's been set up for that I think might be useful programs to look at. Get some partnerships with some situate institutions for this population and something groups, large groups, to develop big capability and skills and small groups that have capability. So some different skills and capabilities. How I didn't know about that program, and I see the encouraging locations including we do the statistic I offer starting from the capacity of popular partnerships or partnerships with organizations. Maybe a little misleading in the sense that we do have the final contact intelligence within Scotland's laws. But I think what we're looking at now is the goals of the sometimes it's different than we're talking about the whole especially what it's doing now to having these guys who are contract intelligence teams not only is the expense some portion of the work for a subcontractor to do that kind of mentorship and transfer their skills from the next time that more organizations and positions compete. How we articulate this, make this happen, and bring it to some fruits in the sun. Mentor competition should feel like it can be okay, so we are running out of time, but we did have time for 2 questions. So please, if you have a question, raise your hand. As someone will come to you, please keep it brief and let us know. Thank you so much for that. The question that I have for you pertains to kind of the overarching perspective of the USA. So I think one of the challenges, like having their food therapies, one of the ways that I'm able to kind of get back on track after 4 years of lackluster leadership is by restoring confidence. And I think that one of the challenges that a lot of critics of USA might say is that it's very hard for Americans and for other countries in terms of democracy and the ability to action and very hard for us to support inclusive development. And we ourselves have in the past countries that are based on so kind of one question that I have for you is, how do we avoid best practices and how do we promote our values when we ourselves have that sense of these values? It's a great question. I would say that great right with being the author but I think that some would say that it's going on the rest of this disqualifying and some feel that ask them to go out and talk to the representation. Because in many cases, there's definitely the fact that if they can access those resources, that's the best we can do. Write the story to hold the correct manner accountable or the police accountable or potentially in that fund. Feel like what we know. It's amazing. It's just a fun, there's creation of just these lives. So kids are not because of this. And this focus, also this product of the movements here that have after the wake up call. So the wake up calls over the years and but the extent to which and this is not going to change overnight, but that we are systems and our approach to this, we're doing stopgap, right? And we're not in a structural, I think that's the key to the phone systems for some time. It's a very significant effort. For that process is because our partners are full and keep their programming going, which is saving lives or strengthening with or holding actors the feedback we want at the same time for a deeper understanding of ourselves, bringing in a sense the recognition that systemic injustices and challenges to bringing that perspective to the way that's part of how we think and it's not how it's built in this kind of but I think the also people don't support people in their hours and traffic hours with climate change. Whether the effort has to be taken and follow the union of people who want nothing more than not to and that's the reality of that sort of collective versus predecessors working on the trouble lines, people with urgency, and hearing that expecting is but to talk about it much challenges people bring up. People say, this, there's a lot of time. We're surprised it's difficult cybersecurity and projected results of elections. No, let's talk about these things. Okay. I'm the administrator. I need to ask, so in the first program, we say something you were saying, often been restricted to operating out of citizens. And so as you look into engaging with partners, what do you see the idea of working on these security positions to make sure that projects are so safe and inclusive? I saw Secretary Blinken express across this yesterday recognizing these areas of U.S. diplomacy as well, being out about looking for ways to ensure that this happens. And listen, it's this picture. If you have a great thousands on the assembly speech, and I think that's a pretty powerful to move from this world to more diplomacy and to do that in the next generation of diplomacy question. I think where I would start is just to underscore the speech about USA's particular nature of USA's voice in the story. I'll speak to how nuclear defense gases that harm to their work. More than 45 people, 10,000 persons from the workforce on the foreign services. So, all of these cyber assemblies, they are looking at the news they made Google even if they are working at this posting back to or messages as well as so I think that's a part of the damage that we see as well as routines is just that these times and expertise and some of these individuals that the industry develops are reasons that often so we knew on Tuesday that ability to be living in the communities and getting on the also to be ambassadors for this agenda. And so I think using those in the position for all of us staff throughout the empowerment and creation of these perspectives. We can go on all day. I would help to do that. Please do it all. It should be up on Capitol very soon, so we need things to replace. And I thank her for joining us and for that really powerful vision. It sounds like USC actually way forward. So we're looking for this. I want to thank everyone here in the audience who's with us live, those who are live streaming. Thank you for joining us. Those that are in the overflow room, thanks for joining us. I want to thank Joel and his team here at SFS to pull this off. I know we really not important. Everyone who's done so much work to pull this together. And thank Chris Fuller and the USPLC team for making their time. Katrina and Paul, thank you, fellows. Finally, just all the students that are here, today you represent the future. Thank you for your commitment, for your energy, for questioning, and all you're doing. And I just look forward to in the coming years how we can all work together to